So you're seeing it moving in the right direction.
You're moving in the right direction.
Awesome.
But
yes,
saying that,
Yeah.
and yes, you can move us into that open door of having a hearing. But if you let that hearing get adjourned, and now I have to wait another 3 months because you let it adjourned, or you let that tenant talk for 3 hours, or you couldn't come up with a determination, and now you're going to make me wait another 1 to 2 months, like that's where it's like it's almost like smoke and mirrors.
Kayla Andrade. I like
that. Whatever. I'm workable.
So listen, I know I didn't pronounce it correctly, but Kayla, welcome.
Thank you, Gary.
Awesome. Listen, I'm excited to have this. I mean, you've been doing so much great stuff out into the community, and especially with everything happening with the relationship between landlords and tenants, and you're like the perfect person, the perfect vessel.
Aww,
yeah, you know,
thanks.
and so I've been paying attention to you, and that's why you're here today.
Well, I've been paying attention to you too, so
Yeah.
I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing, because if not, I got no one to protect.
Yes. How long have you been doing this for now?
It'll be 15 years this coming July advocating. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the first time I met you. I think it was at Monica Jazik's event. You remember that?
Yes,
That
it
was
was
the first
Monica's.
time. Yeah, and then from there, I'm like, wow. Okay, hold on a second. You're passionate about this.
Yeah, it's the you know that there's something not right in this industry. You know that it's affecting landlords, it's affecting tenants, and it's affecting taxpayers. So when you dive into housing advocacy or being a landlord advocate, you can't just look at it from a landlord side of things. You have to get yourself into what it looks like from a tenant, and of course us as taxpayers, because every housing policy that's being introduced, it is going to impact all those stakeholders involved.
For sure. So here's what I want to do. We're going to do something a little different today. I want to break this up into 2 parts because there's a lot that I want to cover with you. So I think the first segment, here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the biggest challenges facing landlords today. I want to dive into some current stats. Now, I know you may not have all the stats, but I'm sure you probably have some. You've seen some stuff. So I want to dive into that. And then also the latest thing that's recently come out, which is Cutting Red Tape Building Ontario.
Sounds good.
Why don't we start off with that one? Because you recently just did a video on that on TikTok.
Yeah.
I crept you on TikTok.
I'm a TikToker.
Yes, I know. You got a lot of views for that one as well, too.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was like 12,000. What was it? No, 3,000. Almost 3,000 views on that. And that was just a couple days ago.
On TikTok?
Yeah.
Over 60,000 views.
What?
In 3 days.
That's wild.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's pretty intense, and it's like the last video I did was about rent reporting as well, and that had over 28,000 views as well. So it's a very popular topic on rent reporting, and of course now with the new bill, it's I think it's one of those things that are gonna really explode as it gets read and it goes through that process and gets debated.
So this is a new bill. It hasn't come out yet. It's just on its way. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the Conservative government just had like the first recognition of what this is. It's got to go through the reads, which is, the Conservative government in power creating their bills. Chances are, it's being approved. We just need to do our part as landlords to be able to say, hey, MPP, you may not be my party of Conservatives or Liberal or NDP for that matter, but I want you to support this because this is going to hold the tenants accountable, protect the landlords, and encourage the investors to come back to Ontario. Because right now we know that they're leaving. So this is an important bill to bring that, transparency and accountability back into the real estate industry. And it's just like every other debt that, someone has to pay. If it doesn't get paid, it goes to your property. It goes to your property taxes, or it's going to your credit. You have your Rogers bill. You have your credit card bill. You have a lease to a car. All of that is impacting people's abilities, but we need it to allow it to be a little bit more streamlined because landlords can do that now. They can report unpaid rent and utilities to the credit bureaus without an order, but it does help with the Landlord and Tenant Board also doing it as well for landlords and property managers who don't know that they can do rent reporting.
Okay, so is that what this bill is specifically? Is just on rent reporting, or is there a lot more that's in this particular bill?
Their bill is really not about monthly rent reporting. This is going to be about if the tenant is going to the Landlord and Tenant Board for unpaid rent and that order does get generated, that is the debt of the order that is going to be shared with the credit bureaus. So when you get looking at, waiting until you go to the Landlord and Tenant Board to get an order, landlords are dealing with a lot of pain at that point, especially with delays and tenants applying for a stay. So this is an opportunity now to explore the other options that landlords currently have available to them, and that is monthly rent reporting. Right. And that is where you can report good and negative payment history to the credit bureau. So you can either reward your good tenants, or you can impact your professional tenants who think that they can get away with it, and also use it as a negotiation tool. Listen, you can't afford the place. We need to get an N11 signed stating that you're going to leave. If you sign that, I won't report you. Right. And you don't have to end up at the Landlord and Tenant Board where they're going to automatically report you. These are the tools that I think landlords need in this economy. And it's not about making, tenants homeless and impacting them. It's about holding everyone accountable for their own actions.
Yeah, look, I agree, right? I mean, this is one of the biggest things that any of us have to pay, which is if you're a landlord, your mortgage payments, and if you're a tenant, your rent payments. And so what I'm looking for is I'm not looking for landlord friendly. I'm looking for fairness. I think that's what people want is fairness, correct?
Oh, it's just about fairness because landlords are held to a very high standard. And tenants have a lot of availability, a lot of services, a lot of resources available to them. Not only the Residential and Tenancy Act, but they have property standards that is available to them. They have free legal aid that's available to them. They have rent relief programs that help tenants in hardship situation or helping them with their deposits. There is a lot of resources out there for tenants. And again, they're painting all tenants to be poor and all landlords to be rich. And in reality, it's not the case. We do have a lot of landlords that are struggling, and we do have a lot of tenants that can't afford to pay more than a 2.5% increase.
Yeah, 100% for sure. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges right now that are facing landlords?
I think the Landlord and Tenant Board in itself.
Yeah.
It's collapsed.
How did it collapse? What happened? What are your thoughts? Because you've been in this space for 15 years, you're saying, right?
It started off with not being able to properly stack the Landlord and Tenant Board with adjudicators. They had their contracts. They weren't renewing them. That started, and then we had COVID, which closed the Landlord and Tenant Board down as they transitioned into online hearings, which a lot of people assume that it was, because of COVID, we went online. They were actually planning to go online prior to COVID, which is great.
Really?
Yeah, because if you look at being in a hearing, one, they're paying a lot of money as taxpayers to have their hearings in a community hall. Mm-hmm. It was even at a hockey arena going off at the end in Kitchener, and if you're paying for that structure. It's again, people are there all day long. I stood there for a client of ours, and I was 9 months pregnant. I had to stand waiting to get your hearing. So a lot of in-person hearings were not as smooth as it should. And again, tenants were late. They missed their bus. There was a lot of excuses why they missed their hearing. Mm-hmm. Now you can do it by phone. You can do it by video. And hey, this is where we have to start introducing having your issue dealt with, not only by a full-on hearing. Maybe it's just about paperwork.
Right. So you don't think we're going to be going back to in-person then? You think this is where we're going to be staying online?
Well, there is always a recommendation where, someone can request in-person, which I think there is a different sites around the province where someone can have access to services like a phone or an internet or a computer or whatnot to have their hearing. Mm-hmm. I know that there is certain organizations advocating to have in-person hearings. I'm not too sure why. I do like the online way of handling the matter. It's just about controlling the audience. It's about controlling the situation between the adjudicator and the parties involved and not letting them speak for 3 hours.
Right. Yeah. I never knew that that's the route that they were taking. I thought they just went online, and then because they went online, they're well, forget it. Why are we going to go back to in person? But you're saying that they actually had this in this play in motion right from the get-go.
Yeah. We take part in like the Landlord and Tenant Board stakeholder meetings, which they do have one coming up on December 6th at 2:00 to give us some updates, and they actually take some questions from the crowd as well. So it's great to see that we have that interaction. It's been kind of put away for a little bit, but they are getting the stakeholders back to give input on what we want to see changed.
Right. Now, what are your thoughts on Doug Downey and his approach to the whole Landlord Tenant Board reform? Is he doing a good job?
What reform?
And for anybody who's listening who doesn't know who that is, can you give a bit of a background on that?
So Doug Downey, he's obviously the Attorney General. He's the one that has to oversee the Landlord and Tenant Board. So having, different opportunities to try to meet with the staff and giving them different recommendations of what we could be doing. Can we see Doug Downey doing a lot better? We sure can. We're looking at decades of this, starting to downhill spiral of the Landlord and Tenant Board. Now it's gone to a point where there needs to be more of a significant impact of a reform in order to get it back to where it is. We have 53,000 applications that are backlogged.
That's wild.
53,000.
What were those numbers prior to COVID? Do you know?
I don't quite know. I don't think there was a crazy backlog, to the point where it was just taking a long time to kind of get your hearing because it was in person. You had to wait. Only so many people in the block. Sometimes they had to get adjourned because you couldn't listen to all of the hearings in one. But to know that you have that type of backlog, that there was applications being lost. There was applications being lost. People fell through the cracks. People just never got their adjournment rebooked again for 3 months. A lot of it has to do with we look at the Landlord and Tenant Board and what's happening, what forms they have, and what they're actually trying to accomplish between non-payment, personal use application, renovations, water bills. We need to start looking at the workload to the Landlord and Tenant Board and what should they really be handling, and is there a full-on hearing that should be required for non-payment of rent?
I would be pissed if my form got lost. What do you mean it got lost?
It got lost.
You're talking about my N4 form that I sent in, that it's just gone. Or the N4, the L1 that when you file it, really.
Yep, they've lost them. They lost them.
That's wild.
And it just goes to prove that when we look at the Attorney General and his magnitude of what he has to do, and I'm seeing him a lot of meetings happening in the BC area. BC is just as bad as Ontario. If you want to look at anyone for an example, let's look at Alberta. Let's look at PEI. Let's look at other provinces where they do have a more streamlined approach to dealing with the consequences, because their rents are still affordable up there as well. And even their filing fees, Ontario is the top province that pays $186 for a filing fee.
What is it in so many other provinces?
Free.
Right.
$25, $75. BC is $100.
It's like a money grab.
The landlords are definitely keeping that place completely funded, and it's not only the landlords funding it with the $186 filing fee with their non-payment of rent. Taxpayers are paying it for it. They just funded $19 million over 3 years to the Landlord and Tenant Board to hire adjudicators at $110,000 a piece to handle tenant accounts that can't afford to pay their rent.
So where is Doug failing?
I think he's failing he's working with the Law Society, he's making it more complicated, it's a full-on court. It shouldn't be a full-on court. It shouldn't be like the small claims court. It's a tribunal. It shouldn't be as complicated as it is, and it shouldn't be forcing landlords to have to legal up in order to have their case dealt with. And we shouldn't be having to throw it out applications just for small minor errors. Now they are planning to change that, where they are going to allow some changes to the Landlord and Tenant Board at the hearing if there is some type of small error. But what is that? What does that look like? We don't know yet.
Right. Yeah, because that's so true. That was the one thing that I was always fearful of when I was filling out my N1 or my L1 forms. Oh my God, did I make a mistake? Did I put the incorrect date when I signed it or how much time I have to give them
missed a
before.
day.
Yeah, like and then you'd have to start the whole entire process all over again. So you're saying that they're looking to have some leniency on that.
Yes. So it could be, I don't know about unit number. It could be the person's name. It could be that they gave an extra day, or the rental, it's beginning of the rental period is on the 1st of the month, but they put the 15th, but they still count it like the 60 days. Like it all depends. Like even for, your N12 personal use application, if you do not give the tenant their 1 month's compensation before that 60-day mark on the form, that could throw out your application.
Right.
Now, technically, if you have a tenant that's in arrears and you don't exchange any money, is that going to look at like you didn't give them the money because you're just using it as the fact that you owe me money? And then people are like, well, they're not moving out, so why should I give them the money because they're telling me that they're not going to go move out? So now it's like, oh, you got to start the process all over again. Right. And here we have landlords who have been waiting 3 years to get access for their home for their son.
Has it been that long though? Like for some of these tenants to be evicted out of these landlords' homes, like 3 years.
Yeah.
Really, but this started now during COVID. This was not an issue prior to COVID. What was the typical timeline? Because I recall 3 months was normal.
I think we were always looking at like even for the time way back when it was around the 6 months from start to finish, and that's
Right.
including the sheriff.
Start to finish, but 3 months to kind of get that hearing, get things going. Then by the time the sheriff got in, so about 6 months, right?
Yeah, but now you got landlords in Mississauga waiting 12 weeks just for the sheriff.
Wow.
12 weeks, and then you're waiting 1 to 2 months for an order. Why are we waiting that long for an order? Why can't we like look at Newfoundland and how they have 1 page? Here's your order. It doesn't have to go into details. It's being recorded for quality assurance.
Yeah.
If you want a recording, go for it. But this is what my judgment is. If you have a problem with it, we'll attach the recording to this order so that if anyone wanted to appeal it, they can listen to it. It's very simple. It's streamlined. Mm-hmm. But again, our overall goal is to alleviate the Landlord and Tenant Board of their applications. And if you see the number one application, it's non-payment rent. And I think with the bill of cutting red tape and building Ontario, knowing that it's going to result into impacting their credit, we could actually see a limitation on how many tenants think that they want to, mess around with the bull. Yeah. And now they're like, I'm going to pay my rent. I'm going to make a payment plan, because right now they have no incentives to make a payment plan. Right. They know that it can take 4 months, 5 months before they get to the hearing. Then they could be put on a payment plan. Then they can mess up that payment plan with a Section 78 attached to it and still apply for a stay. They know the loopholes within the system.
Yeah. What do you think allowed the tenants now to understand and know about all these loopholes? Was part of that COVID? Was it a lot of the Facebook groups that started popping up? Was it advocates for specific tenant groups?
It's going to be Facebook groups. It's going to be tenant unions, taking the idea of these bad landlords in Toronto, these big landlords who are filing for an above the guideline rent increase.
Tenant unions, what do you mean? Is that, I don't think I've ever heard of tenant unions.
Yeah, it's like a tenant.
Is this something new, or has tenant unions always been
No, we were just on TVO, and we had a partner of a tenant union. She was really encouraging the tenants to not pay rent.
That's so wild.
It was a rent strike.
To advocate for don't pay rent. That doesn't make any sense.
It's looking at tenant strikes and unions, and the tenant union actually got funding from CUPE. For $5,000 to create more of these tenant unions to protect the tenant rights. Like, tenants know their rights, but we do have municipal government, putting funding towards groups for tenants to help tenants protect their rights as well. And we're like, where's the landlord side of this? I thought you guys are supposed to be balanced, but understanding that, yes, it's an investment, but we need to start treating our landlords that they are a business within the city, and a landlord who is providing a business that is very valuable to people, because not everyone can be a homeowner. We're not like jacking up the prices. Like, not everyone has a down payment. Not everyone has a good job. Not everyone has good credit. Those private landlords are the ones really filling the need to the supply issue that we do have in this province. Right. In this this is why they are looking at, no rent control on units built after 2018 to try to encourage us. Some mayors are trying to alleviate the development charges and the taxes, because deep down the government nor the nonprofits, if we're struggling to build, they're certainly struggling to build. So you can either work with us or work against us.
Yeah. And you'd mentioned this earlier as well, too, is that, a lot of landlords are actually leaving Ontario to go invest in other parts of, whether it be Canada. I'm seeing a lot of other real estate investment groups really pushing the U.S. right now as well, too. And so in the long run, that impacts the people that you're trying to protect, the tenants, by thinking that you're swinging that pendulum too far to one side. That causes an impact to the people that you say that you're trying to protect.
You got it. And that's the thing. Like when I first went around with my water billing petition and I traveled to different landlords associations and investment groups, and knowing that these people were trying to educate these newbie investors, like, hey, let's go to Hamilton, let's go to Windsor, let's go to Sarnia, let's Oshawa, Ajax. Like those are the people now going, hey, look at Texas, look at Ohio, look at Detroit. Like they're going into Costa Rica, they're going to Dominican, they're going to Mexico. Like people would rather take their chance with the Mexican drug cartel than to be here in Ontario.
Yeah, exactly.
It's on every TikTok video that you could possibly see out there right now. They're like, invest in a very friendly investing province. Right. Ontario is not it. Like these are commercials that could be, very damaging to outside investors, because not everyone's going to want to invest in the same province that they live in, that they do want to go out. And we're stopping those people from wanting to come here because they know it's the worst in all of Canada.
Yeah, for sure. Now, in regards to some stats, I want to get into stats a bit. Now, talking about how long it took to get a tenant out of your property or even get a hearing, I think we're about 3 to 6 months, somewhere in that range when I was doing a lot more investing. Then it went up to what? A year? Year, 18 months?
That was bad.
Then I recently did a webinar. I'm not sure if you saw this or heard about it with Solo. And then the Landlord and Tenant Board actually wrote a letter to us saying, hey, look, we know that you guys are actually going to be doing this webinar. We just want to give you guys some information that things have gotten better. We've now hired adjudicators, and we are now down to, I can't remember what it was. I think it was 3 months or 4 months. What are you seeing? Have you seen that improvement?
I do see an improvement from booking. From being able to say, here's your application, we just filed it, and we have a hearing now coming up in like February. This is one of my close friends.
So you're seeing it moving in the right direction.
You're moving in the right direction.
Awesome.
But
yes,
saying that, and yes, you can move us into that open door of having a hearing. But if you let that hearing get adjourned, and now I have to wait another 3 months because you let it adjourned, or you let that tenant talk for 3 hours, or you couldn't come up with a determination and now you're going to make me wait another 1 to 2 months. Like that's where it's like, it's almost like smoke and mirrors.
Right. Is that what's happening for some of these cases where they're letting the tenants just continue to ramble on?
It's horrible.
Really?
I log on to these sites to watch these hearings, and you just watch the person just talk and talk and talk. We need adjudicators that are like Judge Judy. Like, did you pay your rent?
Yeah, I thought we're paying them $110,000. Are these guys, do they have no background?
Gary, 5 of them have resigned. Check on the Landlord and Tenant Board adjudicators. There's been 5 that have resigned before their term has been done.
But why? If they're getting paid so well, is it hard work? I
think it's stressful. I think it's stressful. I think it's I don't know if they come with the skill set. I think they need landlords, they need property managers, they need people who are good at, diffusing a situation and handling disputes. I think they need that at there, and someone that's been very direct and not afraid, because sometimes when you have like paralegals in the mix, it's kind of like it gets very, section this and section that. It's like, no, there's a section here that says, did you pay your rent? Mm-hmm. No. Why? How much money did you make? Okay, like I have, like, again, landlords shouldn't be that credit card for the tenants. The fact is that you didn't make a payment in the last 8 months with your landlord.
Yep.
You refuse to make any type of payments. You are obviously getting some sort of income. You have allowed other people to live in your unit. Like, you need to make a payment to your landlord. You now have this time frame until the sheriff comes to make that payment. If not, the sheriff's coming.
Yeah.
And again, if you go onto the Landlord and Tenant Board website, there is a section there that says Navigate Tribunals Ontario. Mm-hmm. You can put in, I'm a tenant, I haven't paid my rent. It will navigate to local service managers to help tenants find the resources to get rent relief. It's there for them. it's not we can lead a horse to water, but we can't make it drink.
Yeah.
But we also have to understand that you put a landlord through the Landlord and Tenant Board and all those adjournments and all those loopholes and the stays and the reviews, they're moving their rental unit off the market. And that's what happened through COVID. A lot of people with houses, townhouses, people who had to be on the hook for a no rent increase, no eviction. They had an eviction ban. That's when we started seeing the exodus. And I think a lot of people are doing that now, and they're not seeing it full force because of the capital tax, but people are slowly getting rid of their properties.
Yeah, for sure. Now, to add to that, though, which is I think is very interesting because, you keep hearing the conversation around we need more affordable housing. Okay, but I want to get into that a little later on. But rents have gone up significantly from like a 2-bedroom apartment, say maybe 10 years ago, 1,500 to now, what, 2,200. That's a huge increase. Okay. But now you're seeing rents come down. What do you think's causing that? Because you're definitely seeing it come down. When I saw, we've done a lot of investing out in Peterborough, and we were seeing like an upstairs going for like 25, 26, 2,700, back down now to 21, 22. What do you think's caused it? I have an idea, but I want to hear what you think.
I'll give you let's start off why it was going up. Like let's look at your property taxes. Some areas are getting property taxes of 10%. Our utilities are increasing every single year. Our insurance has obviously skyrocketed for a lot of people. We also have tenants that haven't paid rent. So we have to calculate those losses into the next tenant.
Yep.
Then we have our overall maintenance, the legal fees, everything like that is what's going to cause the rents now to increase. And at the same time is the supply and demand. So knowing that you can get it can also impact the landlords increasing that type of rent. Now, the market has changed a little bit to a point where now we have our condo market being absolutely hit, which I hate at condos anyways.
Yeah,
like,
so
just
did I.
so stupid.
I never pushed anybody into the condo market.
No.
Didn't make any sense.
Hated it.
It was speculative. It was always speculative.
Yeah, and the new bills are a little challenging as well, so I didn't really quite like that part of it. But if you look at what's happening now is that we do have a cap on our students. So the schools, like in the schools were crying about money in 2015, and then all of a sudden the floodgates and newcomers and students are coming and temporary workers and and now all that's starting to be a little bit put on the brakes.
Right.
And I think that's what we're going to be seeing now is the decline in people in the need of the supply, which is going to be brought down a little bit, and the landlords are willing to bring it down a little bit just to get the right tenant, and still might even have to, get that pay out of pocket to keep that property, and hoping to weather the storm. I think that's going to happen, but we still have the need in the community. They're still out there. They're still looking. There is still an affordable housing crisis that we have. And I think we're still going to see rents still, obviously the price of housing going up, but it's still going to be there. But it's just, it's cooled down right now. And plus it's the winter months. Like no one wants to move before Christmas either.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's part of it. I think the other thing as well too is that I think we also have a lot of accidental landlords. Meaning that there were investors that bought condos, investors that bought properties to flip, and then interest rates shot up, and these people had no intention on actually keeping these properties. They just wanted to flip it, get out of it, but they can't because now the homes have come down. They're out of pocket by 100, 150, 300 I've seen in some cases. So you're not going to sell it. Some people do because they have to. But then now your carrying costs are like $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a month, but you can only rent this thing up for $3,000. It's so wild.
The flippers, and then I guess a lot of it comes down to the flipping aspect of things, jumping the prices up because there's a lot of aging infrastructure, and a lot of people didn't have the money or the skill set to get those renovations started, so they came in and had an opportunity to buy that property and try to make a quick, chunk of money to take to buy another property, and it's the game of Monopoly, man. Like everyone knows what you got to do to move around the board and keep buying properties, but when the risks have now outspaced your investments, it's kind of like, okay, let's pause, let's look somewhere else, because I think the risks now outweigh any bit of the profit that we're going to be looking at here in Ontario.
And I also think as well too that there's a lot of these new investors that got in that thought the game was easy, and with everything that just recently happened, they're gone. They're not coming back.
It's the older population too. They're passing it to their kids, and the kids don't want to do with it. So
Yeah.
now they're going to be trying to move into it. I spoke with one of the kids, but it's like my parents are passing this down to us now while they're still alive. There's 6 units here. I have 6 of us as siblings. We all want to like need it for school, for our finances. Like we want to, remove all these tenants out of this property. Does it look bad on us if we're doing it all at once?
Right.
I'm like, are you really moving into it? They're
Yeah.
like, yeah. I'm like, then do it.
Yeah.
If you have nothing to hide, then do it.
Yeah, agreed. Listen, Kayla, thank you so much for all that information. Now, this is part 1. Yeah, this is part 1. We're going to have a part 2 to this, and I want to get into the affordable housing, rent control, and rent eviction, and then some of the tools that can help landlords. So if anybody wants to learn more about you and get in contact with you, how do they do that?
Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok. Everything's going to be underneath either Kayla Andrade or Ontario Landlords Watch.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gary.
Okay.